In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, most merciful. Honorable Madam Vice Chancellor, respected deans and HODs, dear faculty members and wonderful researchers, and dear students, Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to you all. I hope you all are fine. It's indeed a matter of great honor for me to welcome all of you today. I, Samia Sheikh, an MPhil student of Greenwich University, behalf of the entire Greenwich fraternity and Faculty of Management Sciences. As we all know, that research is the heart of academic progress. This seminar is a reflection of our collective commitment to advancing knowledge in our respective field. In order to do so, we are honored to have with us Dr. Farooq Mughal. Dr. Mughal is an associate professor of organizational behavior and human resource management at the School of Management, University of Bath, UK. His research interests mainly revolve around issues of power and subjectivity in management education. Dr. Mughal also serves on the editorial boards of world leading journals, which includes the Academy of Management Learning and Education, Human Relations, and the Journal of Management Studies. He has also provided services as a foreign expert evaluator for the Nash Business School in Islamabad, National College of Business Administration of Economics in Lahore, and Hamdard University, Ilma University, and one of the greatest university ever, Greenwich University in Karachi. Please, sir, join me in giving him a warm welcome. In a bit, allow him to share his valuable insights as today, Mr. Mughal.
So we let the slides load. Just wanted to say it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. It's great to be back in Greenwich. I've spent some wonderful time in Greenwich University, so it's always great to be back at my alma mater. And I'd like to thank Madam Seema Mughal and Professor Shaikh Saab and Ms. Mehreen for organizing this event. And I'm extremely grateful to all of you for coming out in numbers. I know it's Ramadan and everyone is fasting, but I'll try my best to keep this session very short, straightforward, and I'll leave plenty of time for question towards the end. So I'll just put this on. Right. All right, so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk to you about this not so popular research methods, technique, and qualitative research called participant observation. Now, just a quick show of hands. Has anyone heard about observation research before this point? No. Excellent. So I'll make my time worth it today. And by the end of today's session, you'll have some kind of working knowledge about what is participant observation research and why is it an important type of qualitative research when we think about collecting data more qualitatively. The idea for this particular type of research method, which has been around for a very long time in disciplines like anthropology, sociology, but now we are using participant observation as a qualitative research method to supplement our data streams within management research as well. So the idea for writing up a chapter for the Handbook of Research Methods on Gender and Management came about through my own personal experiences of conducting participant observation here in Pakistan. And I wanted to share that experience with you today as well. And so the idea is to give you a working knowledge of how to go about conducting this type of research in Pakistan. So over the next 40 to 50 minutes, or maybe less than that, I'll try to go through some of the different parts of my presentation. So my presentation is divided in about 5 broad sections. I'll start by setting the scene, giving you some basic understanding about qualitative research and why is it different from quantitative research and some of the key challenges that you're likely to face when doing qualitative research in general and particularly within the context of Pakistan. I'd also then try to break this term participant observation down for you to understand what are the different features and characteristics and dimensions of conducting participant observation research. Then I talk a bit about my own experiences of studying gender related issues and how observations can help supplement our understanding about gender within Pakistan. Then finally, I'm going to wrap up by talking a bit about reflexivity in qualitative research. I'm not talking about, there are different types of reflexivity. There can be theoretical reflexivity, but I'll talk about methodological reflexivity in particular. And I'll wrap up with a few ethical considerations for us to think about when we look to do qualitative research as well. I'll leave plenty of time for question and answers towards the end because it's a new topic, I guess, for most of you, and you'd want to know what it's all about and how to go about doing it. So I'll start with a very basic and a broad question. What do you think, in your opinion, are the most significant challenges of conducting qualitative research in general? Anyone? I don't want this to be a one-way stream. What do you think? It is time-consuming? 100%. Absolutely. So it is a time-consuming process? 100%? Absolutely. Absolutely. So our own interests kind of make way within, thank you, within the whole research process. So our own biases, a time-consuming process. These are absolutely some of the things that we need to consider. And I just want to make a claim. There are no right or wrong answers here. So I'm just going to share my opinion, what I think, in addition to what you said, are the key challenges. I think some of the key challenges to qualitative or conducting qualitative research are its validity, reliability, credibility, because we tend to question the rigor of qualitative research because our biases come into play. And there's been a lot of talk around whether qualitative research is the kind of research that can be published in world-leading and top journals. And not a lot of research which is qualitative in nature is published within good journals from Pakistan. And the reason behind is that there are these issues of reliability, because there tend to be a question around fabrication of data. And it is very common when we are doing qualitative research to see that people do fabricate data. And some of the times when we have collected that data, we might not be fabricating it, but we might be misinterpreting it. So this is really important to understand, that how do we go about working out these issues and then developing the themes that come out from that piece of data that we want to publish. But now, we need to be more specific as well. These are more general issues. These aren't just issues focused on Pakistan or just issues about Pakistan. In general, हम सबको बहुत तकलीफ होती है, परेशानी होती है जब हम qualitative research के साथ काम करते हैं. And this is a world over issue around validity and reliability of qualitative research. But what are the challenges of publishing or working with qualitative research in Pakistan? Yes.
Not being ready to be a part of the research?
100%. That actually, you've taken my first point on it. That is correct. Anyone else would like to say why do they think there are challenges to doing qualitative research in Pakistan?
So most of the time the question is being asked regarding the sampling size.
Okay. Absolutely.
People are not convinced with the idea that in qualitative research we have a small sample size.
Absolutely. So people aren't willing, and the sample size is very, very small. I think these are absolutely valid points, and some of the things that I have here from my own experiences of working in doing qualitative research in Pakistan is that there are issues in our society. There are trust issues. As a nation, we are quite a secretive society. Unlike what we say, we are collective, we are open. We are a very closed society. We are quite secretive, and the reason behind is that we have trust issues. Because we don't know someone collecting information or data from us, how would they use it? There are accountability and governance issues, and issues around regulating and working with data and ethics of that data. So there are issues around within this society that we are not as open to researchers about opening up our feelings, our emotions, our experiences as well. And I think the other problem that we face doing qualitative research in Pakistan is that we are predominantly trapped in paradigmatic thinking. We only understand reality in 2 by 2 boxes by quantifying our experiences and emotions. If it's not in numbers, it's not going to be published, is it? So we need to, in order for us to make sure that our research is valid, reliable, credible, and rigorous, we need to ensure that we quantify reality. So when we think about qualitative research or any kind of research, even if it's quantitative, it's not about what you are good at. And I was having this conversation with Shaikh Saab earlier about कि आते हैं कहते हैं मैं स्टेटिस्टिक्स में अच्छा नहीं हूँ तो मैंने क्वालिटेटिव करना है, मैं नंबर्स मुझे नहीं समझ आते हैं तो मैं जी सिर्फ क्वालिटेटिव करूँगा, या मैं क्वालिटेटिव नहीं कर सकता, मैं नंबर्स में हूँ. I think the key thing to understand is any type of research is embedded in our worldviews. How do we see reality around us? It is embedded in our ontological views, how we see reality, and our epistemological views, how we interpret that reality. So when we say that research is trapped within Pakistan in what we call paradigmatic thinking, हम सिर्फ paradigms में समझ सकते हैं research को. Model नहीं है, framework नहीं है, research नहीं है. So that is the kind of problem we're facing. And most of the research which is done in social sciences within Pakistan, it is influenced by Anglo-American sociological positivism. Means that we must quantify reality in order to better understand people's experiences and emotions. And therefore, I think when it comes to qualitative research, I'm not making a claim as to quantitative research is bad and qualitative research is good. Please do not think that I'm trying to do that. What I'm trying to say is that it depends on the need of your topic and how you see a particular social phenomena. So quantitative research is about understanding the breadth of a given issue or a sample. Qualitative research is about understanding the depth of that issue. So therefore the sample sizes are small, and therefore we have lots of challenges to work with in understanding why people aren't so open. We want people to open up for qualitative research so we get better data. One of the challenges that I've faced doing qualitative research, जब भी इंटरव्यू करने के लिए किसी के पास जाते थे तो उनसे पूछते हैं कि जी बताएं अपने बारे में, अपनी लीडरशिप स्टाइल के बारे में बताएं. वो अपनी तारीफों के पुल बांधते हैं. मैंने ये किया, मैंने वो किया, 1960 में ये हुआ, 1980 में ये किया. I'm not interested in that, because what you're trying to show me is not your authentic view on that topic. I want to dig deeper. And therefore, expert interviewers within qualitative research understand this fact. And they quickly move on from this point where you create that shield in front of you to go beyond that. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute, but I'm just trying to set the scene for qualitative research. The other thing with doing qualitative research in Pakistan, and I think this is something that I've particularly I've been an advocate of qualitative research. I've transitioned from quantitative to qualitative work. I was brought up as a quantitative researcher in Pakistan, and I transitioned and I made that transition. Again, not saying which type of research method is good or bad, but just saying there is this third problem which I haven't mentioned here. It is the politics of anti-politics. What do I mean by that? आप किसी से बात करें ना, हम गैर सियासी हैं, हम न्यूट्रल हैं, हमारा कोई इस पे वो नहीं है टेक. Politics is not about politicians and associating yourself with the political ideology. As long as you have an interest in something, you are political. Your act is political. French philosopher Pierre Bourdieu once said, ask a question, can there ever be a disinterested act? I'm going to say a few controversial things now. Please don't take it the wrong way. From love to religion, everything is interest driven. अच्छा काम करते हैं तो क्या मिलता है? सवाब मिलता है, अजर मिलता है. प्यार करते हैं तो you want it to be reciprocated back. इज्जत करते हैं तो you want it to be reciprocated. So reciprocity is the fundamental principle, and our acts are interest driven. And when our acts are interest driven, we are political. When Aristotle said something about politics as the word polis, he meant to do good service for our society, to think about the greater good of our society, the utilitarian perspective behind it. But when it comes to Pakistan and doing this qualitative research, it is very difficult to really go beyond, because of trust issues and other issues, to go and seek the real person, the real emotion, the real experience, your real views on the topic. Because हम गैर सियासी होते हैं, we're not political. किसी से मैंने एक दफ़ा पूछा रिसर्चर से कि आप क्यों पब्लिश करना चाहते हैं अपना काम, तो उन्होंने कहा कि HEC की रिक्वायरमेंट है कि हम पब्लिश करें, वरना हमें प्रमोशन नहीं मिलेगा. अगर आप उस लिए करते हैं रिसर्च कि आपको प्रमोशन नहीं मिलता, या आप इसलिए रिसर्च करते हैं कि आप पैशनेट हैं किसी चीज़ के बारे में, it's a political act by virtue of what you're doing, you're interest driven. And when you get to understand that research is a political activity and it's an interest-driven process, then we start to unpack and go beyond the issues and challenges that we face as a qualitative researcher. So up till now, I've tried to set the scene. I've tried to inform you of the challenges that qualitative researchers often face in Pakistan, because qualitative research is about construction and deconstruction of reality. It is about knowing your surroundings, your social phenomena, your reality. How do you see it? It's about construction and deconstruction of those meanings. आप construct करते हैं उसको, फिर आप उसको deconstruct करते हैं, फिर आप उसको reconstruct करते हैं. That is how you work around qualitative data. So it's about construction of meanings which are constrained by our predispositions, our ideologies. हम किसी इंसान का experience ख़त्म नहीं कर सकते. We cannot start from zero. By virtue of being part of this society or any culture, any household, we've been acclimatized, accustomized, brought up in a certain kind of way. And therefore, our way of thinking will be influenced by that particular style or disposition that we've been quite used to. So, qualitative research is about understanding the process of construction and how our personal views, our ideologies, our experiences come together. And as a researcher, how do we really go beyond that particular point? And I think doing qualitative research on sensitive issues like race, gender, class, power relations becomes more and more difficult, because you're adding another layer that you need to deconstruct and go beyond. Right? So when you do, for example, research around leaders and CEOs of top companies, do you think about the power relation that a leader has with its followers? Why don't we talk about courageous followers? Why do we always talk about courageous leaders? When we see these movies of war, लोग घोड़ों पे चल के आ रहे हैं, तलवारें उठा के आ रहे हैं, अब leader तो आगे जाता है, but followers साथ आ रहे होते हैं, और courageous star followers की बात करते हैं. We don't talk about those hierarchical relations, and I think it's really important to understand कि वो क्या relation. When we talk about these sensitive issues, it's about adding another dimension of subjectivity, our own understanding of the world. So now what I've done up till now is to lay a very generic, basic platform upon which to start talking about participant observation research. What I've tried to do so far is to tell you that qualitative research is a challenge in Pakistan. And therefore we must think about, if we are interested in doing qualitative research, is to think about multiple streams of data, to collect data from different avenues to ensure reliability, validity, and credibility of our research. Interviews might be one stream of data. You go and interview people about a certain research problem, but then you have another way of collecting data through observations. That will help triangulate, that will help you really pinpoint on the issue and have a very good data set. So participant observation is a very unique and not so familiar kind of research technique. I've used participant observation in Pakistan a while ago, and it was a really time-consuming process. A textbook definition of participant observation research is that it's a method of understanding meanings of human existence as they are constructed and enacted by people in everyday situations. Participant observation research is a subset of a qualitative research methodology called ethnomethodology or ethnography. Ethnography is basically the study of cultures and cultural practices. It is often symbolized as the researcher going native into a culture, taking वो अपने साथ डायरी लेके जाता है, पेन लेके जाता है और किसी कोने पे बैठ के वो अपने ख्यालात लिखता रहता है कि इसने ये किया, उसने ये किया, वही जो हमारी इंटेलिजेंस एजेंसी वाले सारा बात करते हैं, ऑब्जर्वेशंस. तो पार्टिसिपेंट ऑब्जर्वेशन थोड़ा डिफरेंट है उससे, because it involves you as a change agent within the research situation. So it's about understanding what is happening around you, not just by talking to people, but by observing their actions and their practices. I always see participant observation or observation research as a bridge that connects the researcher with their subject's experiences through the act of participating and immersing within a situation as it unfolds in front of their eyes. And it is often used to study groups, communities, and organizations. And these days, there are lots of studies being published with observational data. And that data is often supplemented with interview data. But the challenge is how to become part of a group. हम कैसे बन सकते हैं? How can we be an observer of when we're doing research? आप अपना dissertation कर रहे हैं, masters की कर रहे हैं, MPhil की कर रहे हैं, PhD की कर रहे हैं. The question is, सारी बातें ठीक हैं. हम नहीं कर सकते हैं, हम कैसे infiltrate करेंगे? How do we penetrate and really get that data from a group of people? When we were developing the book chapter for the handbook of research methods in gender and management, we developed a model for participant observation research, or how to conduct observation research in different situations. It can be research about a company, किसी factory floor पे खड़े होकर you want to observe a particular situation unfolding. We've identified 6 fundamental features of participant observations, or how to conduct that. The first set of features is time and immersion. By immersion, I mean you have to be part of a particular situation for a certain period of time. You have to go into that context, be part of that context, immerse yourself within that context, and spend a considerable amount of time looking and seeing what is happening. Immersion is not a very easy act, because when we're trying to immerse ourselves, we might be a misfit. आप जाते हैं factory floor पे factory workers को देखने के लिए, आप तो सूट बूट पहन के चले जाएंगे, आप तो टाई लगा के चले जाएंगे, आप तो जीन्स पहन के चले जाएंगे, Levi's या जो भी आपके नाइकी के ब्रांड्स हैं, आप सारे पहन के चले जाएंगे. How do you relate with the workers? आपने तो जाते साथ ही हायरार्की क्रिएट कर दी, और आप चाहेंगे कि वो अब आपको सच सारा कुछ बता दें. You need to understand that there is this distance that you've created by virtue of your appearance. How do you go about, even कि जब आप जाएंगे उनके साथ आप सवालात पूछेंगे, most likely 100% bilingual questions पूछेंगे आप उनसे, mixed with certain words of English. Of course, we are a post-colonial society. We have now become more neo-colonial. We found different masters elsewhere, and therefore, I'm not saying that I'm beyond that. अंग्रेजी में बात करने का मकसद ये है कि I'm part of that neo-colonial tradition, but just saying कि immersion की जब हम बात करते हैं, means to be part of it, of that situation, to live that situation, to breathe that situation, to feel what they're feeling. It's easier said than done, and to spend a certain amount of time. It can be days, it can be months, it can be years. When I was doing my observation research in Pakistan, I spent months following a group, following 4 different groups of people, just to see what they were doing, how they were doing. It is to better understand those unspoken practices and what do they mean. Then we got issues of trust. आप तो चले जाएंगे, पर trust कैसे create करें? How do you create that trust with those people? You might want to think about how rapport building will help you develop that element of trust. And then you need to adopt a particular kind of identity. we all have an identity of who we are, the kind of dispositions that we have, the experiences that we've gathered. Identity can often be given to you as a researcher by your participants. Agar aap, for example, you're doing research on single moms working. If you go in and you are a single mom yourself, you have a talking point to create that identity. If you are a working father and you are taking care of a family of 4 and you go and do interviews with people who are single earning households where father goes out to work every day, you got a point that you can really, like, people can relate to you with that identity, right? But agar aapke aur usme there are differences, then it becomes really difficult. You really need to think on your feet. How do we really go about creating that identity to connect with our participants? Then there are issues of membership and location. When you when you spend time, when you immerse yourself, you develop an identity, you want to get that core membership of that group. If you are researching leaders, if you're researching managers, executives, you're observing them, you might want to get that membership, being part of it. And then it's about understanding the context, the location in which you're situated in. The difference between any other observation research and participant observation research is that you can actively participate in that situation. You can go and give stimuli, you can go and nudge people to talk about something, you can give them questions to answer just going around. If you want to do a study about smokers, right? हर ऑफिस में एक group of smokers होते हैं, वो जाते हैं हर 15-20 घंटे के बाद स्मोक करने के लिए इकट्ठे होते हैं. You want to study the consumer habits of how consumers of different cigarette brands consume and how do they connect. That can be a really interesting research question. You need to be member. How do you find membership is the question, right? Cigarette offer करेंगे, पिएंगे, गप्पे मारेंगे. फिर आहिस्ता आहिस्ता you get to know कि उनकी habits क्या हैं, कितने बजे जाते हैं, क्या करते हैं, क्या बात कर, inside jokes क्या हैं, वो joke, those jokes, and how do they relate to one another based on those, on the element of humor. There's a lot of research around humor and smokers, by the way, so I don't know if that would be useful for anyone. But just to move on, and to move on into the final stage of my presentation, to talk about reflexivity. As I said, participant observation research is a subset of ethnography, about studying cultures and observing what people do, involves establishing relationships, like I've just mentioned on the framework. It is very important that we reflect on our role as researchers, and that is where I started off earlier in my presentation, कि अपने आप पे focus करना है. We need to think about our role. How do we impact the process and outcomes of any research? क्योंकि हम interest driven हैं, हम चाहेंगे कि our research gets published, right? If we are driven and motivated, it is a political process, so we are going to shape the process to be that. अगर under the curve numbers नहीं आ रहे हैं, अगर regression नहीं बैठ रहा, तो हम कोशिश करेंगे कि वो बिठाएं उसको. थीम नहीं निकल रही क्वालिटेटिव डेटा में, हम कोशिश करके अच्छी सी थीम बना के रिपोर्ट में डाल के टीचर को दे देंगे, टीचर फुल नंबर दे देगा हमें. थीम इमर्ज नहीं करेगी, थीम आपने फोर्सफुली बना दी एक सर्टेन थ्योरी को जहन में रखते हुए. सो वी नीड टू थिंक अबाउट आवर ओन interests and biases towards that research process. So we must reflect on our role as researchers, directing our attention towards ourselves, the disparity that exists. When I was doing gender research in Pakistan and understanding how different genders in Pakistan are learning or learning to become managers using a particular action research technique called action learning, I was also interviewing women, right? So as part of, I collected observations, I then interviewed women, and when I was observing them and when I was interviewing them, I realized at one point in time that there is this gender difference between men and women in Pakistan because of our society, the way it's set up, right? They are reluctant to be as open as others because a man researching women is is something that is sensitive in general. So how does that work? How does my gender affect how I understand women's experiences? And I cannot start to even think the kind of challenges women face within the working environment of a male-dominated society like Pakistan. I cannot even start thinking. However, I understand that I will have an influence on the production of data. क्योंकि हम qualitative research की बात कह रहे हैं, मुझे उसको interpret करना पड़ेगा based on my understanding as a man about women's experiences, because I cannot relate to them in that particular way. So we also must understand कि who defines which gender gets to be like more powerful in a society? Our social discourses, culture, social, class, race, religion, they all come into play in a certain way, shape how we act and behave in the research process, and applies to both parties. Women researching men, you will hardly see a lot of women going out and observing men on a factory floor in a production site, because it's unsafe in general. That's what we tend to think about it. Might not be, but just saying that there are issues of concerns to consider. And therefore, we must understand what is our role in this production of data. And therefore, I always encourage, if you are thinking of doing qualitative research, think about methodological reflexivity. How do you shape the process of data? How our influences, interests shape the outcomes of the research process? Be aware of your role as a researcher. Be aware of yourself as a researcher, and how do you connect and construct and interpret data? How do your influences, experiences, and positions impact your thinking and your participants' thinking? That's very important for us to understand. And if I were to define or say what reflexivity is, someone in literature says it's the interpretation of interpretation. आप जब किसी चीज़ को देखते हैं, उसके बारे में लिखते हैं, it's about interpreting that in a particular way. So it's about making your unexamined meta-theoretical commitments more visible. You're telling people, okay, I believe in this particular ideology, and therefore I'm going to look at these experiences in a certain way. A lot of research which is qualitative in nature doesn't get published in good journals is because we do not, or we fail to make our meta-theoretical commitments visible to the reader. I'm a libertarian. I'm a left Marxist. I truly believe in two different classes of people that exist in society. One are dominant, the other are dominated. And when I write papers, I make it very clear to the reviewers, to editors, to readers of my research that I will see things very differently. I do not believe in status quo. I do not believe that a status quo must shape who we are as individuals. But मेरे कहने से कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. It still stays there. It is there. But just to say, I make my commitments very clear. I tend to see gender as equal. Not everyone sees gender as equal. ऊपर से कह सकते हैं, अंदर से क्या है, हमें नहीं मालूम. So it's about making our ideologies, our commitments very clear. Austrian philosopher Karl Otto Neurath gave this amazing, he writes in his book about something else, but I think it's a great analogy to think about ourselves as qualitative researchers within the research process. Karl Neurath says that we are like sailors who on the open sea must reconstruct our ship but are never able to start from afresh. कि जब हम रिसर्च करने के लिए जाते हैं किसी भी इन्वायरमेंट में, हम नए सिरे से रिसर्च नहीं कर सकते, हम नए सिरे से कुछ नहीं कर सकते. क्यों? कि हमें जो एक्सपीरियंसेस मिल चुके हैं, हमें जो सारी ज़िंदगी जिस तरह हमें शेप किया गया, हम उसको ज़ीरो नहीं कर सकते हैं. हमें वहीं से स्टार्ट करना पड़ेगा जहाँ पे हम हैं, as long as we acknowledge that we are sometimes in a privileged position to do that kind of research. So वो कहता है कि we can never start from fresh because we as researchers make use of those experiences like the timber within that shipwreck. But we cannot put into dock in order to start from scratch because during their work they stay on the old structure. हम अपनी experiences के साथ रहते हैं और उन्हीं के साथ काम करना है. हम अपने आप को reborn नहीं कर सकते हैं. We cannot give ourselves a new set of experiences because that is virtually not possible. So we must go through that. But if you even say that my experiences are unique than your experiences, and when I go to you and collect data, when I observe what you're doing, Berger and Luckman in their famous book from 1960s called Social Construction of Reality, they talk about subjectivity, our own dispositions, our influences. They say that our subjectivity is only accessible to us in a way that it cannot be accessible to you. चाहे मैं आपसे 10,000 सवाल पूछ लूं, your experiences will always be your experiences and mine will be mine, and I will always interpret your experiences based on how I see the world. And based on that, my past is available to me in memory in a fullness with which I can never reconstruct anyone else's. So when we are interpreting data, we must be reflexive. It's about the interpretation of interpretation. Are we misinterpreting other people's data or other people's experiences? It's a very important thing for us. So finally, when I do any kind of research which is qualitative in nature, which is observation research, or which is any other type of reflective research, or if it's interview research, I use this triangle. I think about who I am, where I'm positioned in relation to my participants and the topic, what are my experiences, and how do all of these things interplay, because I see my participants through this frame of reference, and it will always be there, that triangle, and I'll always keep looking at them as long as I recognize that my influences are different than anyone else's. Finally, here are some quick points about ethics, because qualitative research के ऊपर बहुत ethics के सवाल उठते हैं, because we know that we often create data out of nothing. So when we are doing research around issues which are sensitive like gender, race, power relations, these are uncomfortable questions sometimes. So you might want to think about how you are approaching your participants, whether you're making them comfortable or uncomfortable. When you're going into a situation, do not suppress the cultural norms. Always appreciate those cultural norms. Always consider how those cultural norms will play a role in what kind of information that you're seeking will be given to you. And finally, neglecting beliefs that other people hold about something and saying, "Nahin, jo main keh raha hu wo theek hai," then it becomes problematic. Then your research starts to go in a different direction. Thank you very much for listening. This was quite a short kind of a brief as to about what qualitative and observation research were. If you feel like you found something very interesting, even a word, I take it as a success. And please feel free to follow us. And if you have any questions, I'd be very happy to take them now. Or if you can think about something else, you're very welcome to reach out to me. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Farooq, for sharing your expertise and insights. Okay, so Deepak, I have a question for you.
Yeah, hi sir. How does participant research complement other qualitative research methods in gender and management sciences?
That's an excellent question. I think we go back to the very first challenge that we need to ensure that our work is rigorous, our work is credible, so we need to have more than one stream. What I'm trying to argue here is that we must have a broad research strategy, more than one streams of data. So when we observe something, then we can develop an interview questionnaire based on the fact that what we've observed. And you collect that data, which is in form of your own notes as a researcher, your diary, for example, and it's perfectly fine to have your own diary and to write down what you've observed, and based on those observations that you collect, you can audio record, you can video record that particular situation, and think about what happened when you were there. What did you experience? What did anyone else experience? Take that data and then cross-reference it with the interviews that you've had with the participants in that situation. Sometimes you find trigger questions that come from a situation, and you ask them, उस situation में आपने तो ये नहीं किया था, because आपने तो उस time पे चले गए थे, conflict तो नहीं किया, आपने क्यों नहीं उसको challenge किया? Because observation research is now supporting your interview questionnaire, and it's giving you an additional data stream to say, okay, in this situation, it is more likely that people are going to shy away. Now, let me give you an example from my own research. I was trying to, quite a while back, I was doing this bit of research in Pakistan. I was trying to see a new learning technique can be introduced in business schools. I was collecting data from 4 different groups in 4 different business schools in Pakistan. And I was first running a learning session as a facilitator and an observer. So I was observing the situation, and I wanted the participants of that particular group to take responsibility of their own learning and challenge one another and ask questions from their colleagues to learn more, challenge their assumptions. मैंने देखा क्या कि लड़के जब लड़कियों से क्वेश्चन पूछने लगते थे ना, तो मेरी तरफ देखते थे और मुझसे क्वेश्चन पूछते थे. कहते हैं क्वेश्चन उससे पूछो, उससे क्वेश्चन क्यों पूछना है? This kept happening, right? I did not realize what was happening. And naively, because I was a very new researcher, being part of this society in Pakistan, मेरे लिए कोई नई बात नहीं थी. टीचर को देखना है, सामने बैठा है, उसके थ्रू क्वेश्चन स्प्रिंग बोर्ड करना. In fact, this was a micro form of aggression. मैंने इंटरव्यू में पूछा कि I later realized कि ये कुछ different हुआ है. I asked कि ऐसा क्यों कर रहे थे? वो सर हम रिस्पेक्ट करते हैं ना, इसलिए फिर अच्छा नहीं लगता कि डायरेक्टली क्वेश्चन पूछें. You're instantaneously saying that there are gendered hierarchies. There are relations, power relations between men and women. So we, by virtue of respecting them, you're showing a micro form of aggression. You're depriving them of an opportunity to learn in that situation because it's impolite. Politeness, so I use that data in my interview schedule to supplement and collect more data. So as a broad research strategy, you have multiple streams to collect that data. Does that kind of answer your question? Yeah.
So my question to you is, as a researcher, how do we ensure the accuracy of the collected data?
That's $1 million question every researcher, qualitative research around the world is asking. Even I ask myself. I think collecting qualitative or soft data, it takes a while to understand कि जो आपको data मिल रहा है वो किस किस्म का है. वो जो कह रहे हैं वो क्या आपको दिखावा है उनका या वो real, it's the real self. I think the art is to design questions which are more deeper, which are more reflective, which are more open-ended. शुरू में जब मैं collect करता था data, मैं closed-ended questions बहुत पूछता था. आपका लीडरशिप स्टाइल, आप कैसे लीडर हैं, इस सिचुएशन में आप क्या करते हैं, वो ट्रैप कर देता था मैं उनको एक सिचुएशन में. आहिस्ता आहिस्ता I learned कि it has to be more open, it has to be about something that's more relevant to them, it has to be more experiential, which makes them think. I mean, I don't think that there is a way to really detect this data is fake or bogus, but as long as you have a certain number of questions to approach a situation from I mean, at a point when I understand कि ये मुझे सही information नहीं आ रही यहाँ से, I leave that point, start something else, I circle back to that. अच्छा तो आपने तो वो कहा था कि ऐसे तो नहीं हो, तो थोड़ा और इस पे कह सकते हैं कैसा है. So it's about your techniques as an interviewer to really push the person. I was in an interview once with an interviewee. This was my first experience. नया था. And at one point in time, that lady started crying in the middle of an interview. मैं तो tissue paper ढूंढता रह गया. I did not realize I started pressing on a certain aspect. At that point in time, I knew this data cannot be really faked because it's coming from within. The passion, the cues that you receive from your participant, you start knowing, I mean, they are enjoying the interview or they are like very emotional about it. जब मुझे लगता है that's called an interviewer high. Running high करते हैं ना हम sport खेलते हैं, runners high. Interviewer जब high पहुंचते that's the best feeling. You know it instantaneously. You got that connection going on, and that data is really good. What I'm trying to argue here is that you can always supplement it with observation research. कि आप फिर थोड़ा और accuracy ला सकते हैं अपने data में कि ये situation नहीं बात बैठ रही. आप फिर दोबारा ऑडियो सुनते हैं इंटरव्यू की, ऑब्जर्वेशन नोट्स देखते हैं, यू वांट टू गो बैक टू द पर्सन सेइंग मैंने नोट किया कि आपने ये बात कही, इज इट ओके इफ आई आस्क अ फॉलो अप क्वेश्चन. कभी कभी हम ईमेल कर देते हैं अपने पार्टिसिपेंट को, वो फिर फॉलो अप जवाब हमें देते हैं या फ़ोन कॉल कर लेते हैं. सो या वेरी डिफिकल्ट टू पॉइंट आउट कि वेदर दिस इज fake data or real data, but there are techniques to overcome, and with experience you get to know that this is good data or bad data.
Sir, as you have mentioned this thing that everyone's experiences are different, like your experience and other person experience will be different. Now every answer will be different also. So how will you conclude?
That's a very good, excellent question. I think when we're doing interviews, and ये वहाँ पे भी पूछते हैं मुझसे students when we're doing dissertations, MSc dissertations, कि how many interviews are enough? I think my rule of thumb is कि when the data starts becoming redundant, हम 5 interviews हमने किए, हमने उनको run किया, उसके themes देखें, उन्होंने for example 3 बातें की, अगले 5 interviews ने 3 और बातें की मुख्तलिफ, right? अब 15-20 इंटरव्यूज़ के बाद जब हमें लगता है कि वो 4-5 थीम्स दोबारा रिकर कर रही हैं, बट ऑफ कोर्स इन अ डिफरेंट पर्सपेक्टिव, एक्सपीरियंस उनका डिफरेंट है, पर इशू वो सेम टच कर रहे हैं. इट कैन बी अबाउट जेंडर डिस्क्रिमिनेशन, राइट? पर हर का एक्सपीरियंस डिफरेंट होगा जेंडर डिस्क्रिमिनेशन का. किसी ने उसको ऑफिस में पाया होगा, किसी ने उसको दुकान में पाया होगा, किसी ने उसको टैक्सी में पाया होगा. When I get to see कि there is this discrimination happening, कि ये टैक्सी वाला मेरे लिए नहीं रुकता, उसके लिए रुकता है, क्यों है ये? Because I'm dressed differently, what is it? और ऑफिस में ये उसके साथ क्यों बात करते हैं, मेरे साथ क्यों नहीं करते हैं? When it starts becoming redundant, I tell my students कि now you've got enough data, because हम depth देख रहे हैं, हम breadth नहीं देख रहे हैं. So we dig deeper. और उन्हीं थीम्स को फिर हम क्या करते हैं कि हम फिर उनको फिर कोलैप्स करते हैं, डेटा को फिर रिविजिट करते हैं, फिर देखते हैं कि वेदर दो 6 थीम्स किसी और फॉर्म में तो नहीं पाई जाती. देन वी कीप ऑन लुकिंग एंड गोइंग बैक टू इट. बट माई रूल इज व्हेन डेटा बिकम्स रिडंडेंट, थीम्स स्टार्ट अपीयरिंग बट इन अ डिफरेंट पर्सपेक्टिव, देन वी स्टॉप कलेक्टिंग डाटा.
Sir, being a qualitative researcher, this is something which is very new to me as well. But a few things, I just wanted to know that what is the difference between observation research and phenomenology? Because when we are doing phenomenology, we are doing the same things. Interview protocol, along with that, we are also doing using the observation protocol as well. So how is it different from phenomenology?
So when it comes to phenomenology, it's a research about understanding people's experiences in a particular situation. And phenomenology for me is kind of an orientation, it's a philosophy. And if I remember correctly, the roots of this philosophy go back to Heidegger's way of understanding experience and social reality. And you can have a particular philosophical way of looking at things. And observation research is a method to supplement either ethnography, research about culture, or phenomenology, research about experiences. So if I were to break it down into levels, we start with ontology. Our worldview, and then we have epistemology, how we interpret that worldview. And when it comes to epistemology, that's where I put phenomenology is like a philosophical orientation. Then we've got axiology, the values associated with it, and then we've got methodology. What is our strategy? Multiple streams of. Then we've got methods. Observation is right at the end. It's a means to collecting. Interview is a means to collecting. You can have a view of, when I was doing my action learning research, I was using phenomenography. It's more pragmatic about experiences, how experiences are embedded within practice. Phenomenology is how our previous experiences inform our future practice. So it's slightly different. And ethnography would be understanding how cultural practices inform our experiences and how experiences inform those cultural practices. I don't want to get more philosophical, it's about understanding structuring structures and how do they structure structures. It's a very tongue-twisting kind of a way of looking at it. But yes, absolutely. So you can have an orientation of looking at the world and being interested and using observation as a means of going about collecting that data. Yes.
Hello, sir. I wanted to ask, sometimes people are very hard to talk to. They are very reluctant to tell their stories. So how can we like make them more open about themselves, their stories, their issues, basically?
Yeah, I think
So
yeah, I
please.
think that's a great question, and I always find that difficult even till now. I mean, it's been more than a decade doing qualitative research. Whenever I go in, I always find people start off on a very shaky note. What I've learned over the years is to do not go with the interview instantaneously. Spend 15 minutes talking about their life. They're human beings. They've got commitments beyond this. And acknowledging who they are and they've given this time to you. And I think when people get to know you that you're not there to take something away from them, sometimes I think you are a listening ear and get to that point. कभी कभी तो interviews हमें ख़त्म करके दोबारा आना पड़ता है because we just aren't able to break through here. And I think repo is very important. दूसरा, I was talking about identity. I was talking about time spending with the person. The way you dress, it affects your person because वो उस तरह dress नहीं है, आप अच्छे से dress होके चले गए. It creates that barrier. You use a certain type of language. हम अक्सर समझते हैं कि जो हम क्लास में यहाँ करते हैं ना और एकेडमिकली करते हैं वो मैनेजर सब समझते होंगे. उन्होंने ओबी की सारी थ्योरियाँ पढ़ ली होंगी. किसी को नहीं पता क्या है. You go there, you ask them very simply, in very simple terms. I think थोड़ी देर पहले मैं बात कर रहा था शायद साहब ने चैट जीपीटी आजकल बड़ा hot topic है. It's not an evil. It's going to stay here. It's going to stay here forever. It's like one of the variants of COVID virus going to stay here forever. This doesn't like me. So you can use ChatGPT as a way to simplify certain questions that you have. You develop an interview schedule, a number of questions, and then you can use ChatGPT to help you summarize it for a second grader. There's this instruction, and when you do that, you start getting, I think now I can relate with them. A colleague of mine in Lahore did this research with the cleaning staff of their university, of a very top private business school in Lahore. And they used students to collect that data. And when they first started collecting that data, they weren't able to go anywhere with that data because wo jo cleaners wahan the, janitorial staff, they always saw those students but could never relate to them because you know where they collected, where they started doing those interviews, wo cafeteria ki bajaye, they started doing those interviews in the toilets. This is, you need to be prepared to let go or forego privilege. Standing in a smelly toilet for half an hour, talking to them, or 15 minutes here and there, it makes a difference. It's just saying that you go into their environment sometimes. You talk to them, make them feel like this is okay. When you do that, you descend barriers. It's not an easy task. It takes a while. And maybe these tips might be helpful when you're doing it.
Sir, already you have explained about the authenticity of the data in qualitative research, but I'm little confused in how the validity of the data in qualitative research with relate to the triangulation method.
Yes. So, first of all, there is research that is published with just single data stream like interviews or observations. It's published in really good journals, although it takes a while to publish that data, to convince reviewers that this data really talks about a particular phenomenon. I think when it comes to validity, reliability, rigor, in comparison to quantitative research, you need to be more reflexive in your approach. When you're telling readers, editors, or reviewers about a particular phenomenon, tell them what influenced you. And when we know what your influence is, the readers use it as a lens to interpret what you're saying. Like I said, I'm a Marxist. I mean, whenever you read my papers, you'll always find power relations as a main theme. I always look between power relation between leader, follower, teacher, student, father, son, for example. And I look into this as a way of And when I explain my theoretical commitment, the readers are more convinced that what I'm saying comes from a particular angle, and therefore it increases the reliability. Now to the second part of your question about triangulation. Now if you're using more than one data stream, like it can be reflective diaries. These days, diary method is a very interesting method of collecting data. You ask workers to keep a diary. Every week they write something and they give that. It can be in a textual form. You can do interviews. You can have observation data that you collected from your own notes. There are 3 different points now, and you converge on a particular theme. That is one way of really pinpointing the issue, because you spot it into 3 different themes or streams. So you can tell reviewers and readers, this theme was spotted in 3 different data streams. When we ran the data, we identified a recurring theme across the data set. It can be that as well. These days, it's more common to have multiple data streams, because आजकल बहुत क्वेश्चंस एथिक्स के उठते हैं कि एक डेटा स्ट्रीम के साथ तो आपने 30 इंटरव्यू किए हैं, कैसे अभी तो मुझे सर बता रहे थे ऑर्गेनाइजेशन स्टडीज़ में इनका पेपर छपा है, बहुत बहुत मुबारक हो, ऐसे अच्छे जर्नल में पब्लिश करना, आई मीन यू नीड टू हैव गो बियॉन्ड द जनरल फ्रेम ऑफ थिंकिंग.
Sir, in many organizations are trying to provide a secure environment to women. So do you think that this thing and many policies are adjusted especially for women so that they can balance both their work life and their primary responsibilities at home? So do you think that it can create biasness in workplace and can impact gender dynamics in an organization?
That's a good question. Let me gather my thoughts. I think it should not destabilize the existing status quo. Giving someone the benefit of having caring responsibilities doesn't mean कि उसको छुट्टी दे दी तो उसके पास कुछ करने के लिए नहीं है. I mean, it's about giving them time to go attend to their needs off the campus or off the organization. I think, for me, gender discrimination dynamics are more deep issues than they go beyond organizational strategies. Strategy is a rhetoric. It's about saying we do something good as a company. I mean, again, this is my Marxist thinking coming in. We're doing it because we want to tell the world we are a good organization. Come work for us. We are the best. We give you food, free food. We give you rides home. But that does not really make the organization superior in a certain form. I think they're still grounded within a particular cultural context. They are still influenced by the national culture, the society and societal values. So no, I think the gender discrimination is a more fundamental issue, and strategy is just a way of showing a more positive outlook of it. It's a way to make your workers productive in the end. It's nothing else. It's about money. It's all about economics. It's about money. It's about capitalism. Capitalism is there because there is interest. And as long as there is interest, all managers are greedy little people who want to get more money. Yes?
My question to you is, how can organizations measure the success of their gender equality initiatives?
They can start by inviting more women in the boardroom, inviting more women to participate in decision-making processes, inviting more, not just women, but people from other genders as well, to make them part of the major changes, initiatives that are being rolled out. So if it's only about men making decisions for others within the company, I think gender initiative, if there is one for an organization, is highly unlikely to be successful unless we have participation. We have ambassadors and champions from within different gender groups to really roll that initiative out. So we're not just making a decision for the sake of it. I mean, I was referring to a point earlier, as a man, I might not be able to relate to women's experiences or experiences of other genders because I've never lived those experiences. Why not make other genders be part of that initiative? So for me, if we have to be successful, make it a broader participative exercise rather than making it a club for certain people to make a decision. We are all working on this issue. We're all still pushing it. There is a little bit of breakthrough, but for cultures like Pakistan, it is still in the very early stages. We're still learning to accept that there can be more. Gender is not just binary, it is beyond. We just started accepting that. And not everyone accepts that as well. So I think it's going to be very challenging. But more research work, which tells people stories, might just be the way to go forward.
Okay, so I have two questions for you for research scholars. The first is, how can researchers ensure that their presence as observers does not influence the behavior of participants during the participant observations?
Excellent. So there are two types of observations in general. One is what we call complete observation, and one is called complete participation. Complete observation is when you are a fly on the wall. Fly on the wall, समझते हैं ना, मक्खी दीवार पे बैठी है वो आपको देख रही है. As a fly on the wall, you collect data more covertly. When you collect data covertly, it raises ethical issues. And these days, it is advised not to collect data covertly, because that is it violates the rights of your participants, because they don't know that the data is being collected. Complete participation, on the other hand, is when you are doing research overtly. Yes, they're going to modify their behavior. They are going to modify what they're doing, which is completely normal. And everyone knows that. As an overt researcher, आप आए हैं, कहते हैं ये आए हैं साहब, ये आपको observe करेंगे. हर बंदा जो है वो जल्दी जल्दी काम करना शुरू कर देगा, चाय के कम ब्रेक लेगा, सिगरेट पीने के लिए नहीं जाएगा, क्योंकि हमें देखा जा रहा है, हमें इंस्पेक्ट किया जा रहा है. I think observation के लिए it takes time in immersion. That's something I was talking about earlier. You have to be within the field for days and weeks so that people start accepting you. When they start thinking of you as a part of that context, only then they will not think of you as someone who's observing them. So you have to keep on going to the field. Anthropologists, sociologists, सालों Amazonian tribes को देखने गए, African tribes को देखा उन्होंने. They've been there. शुरू में it was different. कोई नई चीज़ उनके environment में आई है. But then they started understanding, and then you take a back seat and you see what they're doing rather than influencing their behavior. So it takes a while, time and immersion, identity, it's about location, it's about understanding all those 6 features. If you follow them, there will be less impact, but there will be impact. And that's where you come in and tell us about your reflexive self within that situation. कि आपने कैसे impact किया उस situation को. We're saying, do recognize your position within the research. Do not take away. अक्सर हम quantitative research करते हैं ना, हम researcher गायब कर देते हैं process से. गायब हो गया बस. Data आया, ये table है, table को पढ़ लिया हमने, सारी values अच्छी हैं, positive correlation है between A and B and C. Qualitative researcher में हम researcher को central point बनाते हैं, because tool क्या है qualitative data में? Tool researcher है. Researcher is the tool. Quantitative में your survey is the tool. Qualitative में it's like a sponge. You're collecting data. I hope that answers.
So related to this, we have another question like, how do researchers choose which aspect of a workplace to observe related to gender-based observation?
That's a great question. I think it starts off with what you're interested in. आपका interest किस चीज़ में within that workplace? Are you interested in understanding leader-follower behavior? Are you interested in understanding manager-subordinate behavior? So you first identify what is it that you want to contribute from a management perspective. You identify that management problem, and then you think about how gender plays a role to impact that management process. Right? Leadership है, तो how does gender affect how a leader is, whether a leader is successful or not? Does gender affect how a manager is successful or not? So you need to identify the management problem and then think about how gender impacts that management problem. They go hand in hand, side by side, and that is how we start connecting one with the other.
Thank Thank you, sir, for sharing amazing ideas with our students and teachers also, researchers also. I'm sure the journey they're about to embark upon is going to be best in their minds and heart forever. Okay, so that was indeed a thought-provoking session, and thank you so much, Mr. Dr. Mughal, for gracing us with your presence, and we look forward to additional such session as well. Thank you so much. So I would like to call Dr. Shaikh and Miss Mehreen to present shield and bouquet. May I?